In the heart of Colorado's majestic mountains, there was a cozy little cabin community. That seemed like a dream come true for anyone looking to escape the chaos of city life. This place wasn't fancy or over the top. It was simple, peaceful, and surrounded by towering pine trees and snow-dusted peaks. It was the kind of spot where people came to unwind, breathe fresh air, and enjoy some quiet time away from their busy lives. For one resident, Alex, this cabin wasn't just a getaway. It was a hard-earned milestone. After years of working long hours as a software engineer in a bustling city, Alex had finally saved enough money to buy their very own slice of paradise. The cabin itself wasn't huge, but it felt perfect. Warm wooden beams on the ceiling, a crackling stone fireplace, and big windows that let sunlight pour in while offering stunning views of the wilderness outside. For Alex, this was more than just a vacation home. It represented freedom, stability, and a reward for all the sacrifices made along the way. But owning a piece of this mountain retreat came with responsibilities. Like most planned communities, this one had a homeowners association, HOA, which set rules about things like noise levels, trash disposal, and how often lawns needed trimming. At first, Alex didn't think much of it. They figured the HOA would help keep everything running smoothly, ensuring everyone could enjoy their time here without any major disruptions. And honestly, at the beginning, it did feel that way. Neighbors were friendly, exchanging waves during morning walks or sharing tips on the best hiking trails nearby. The HOA meetings were low-key affairs where people discussed minor issues over coffee and cookies, almost like a casual gathering rather than a formal meeting. Things started to change when a new neighbor moved into the community. She quickly introduced herself as someone who believed in following the rules and made it clear she intended to hold others accountable too. Her name isn't important here, but her personality certainly was. Let's call her what everyone else eventually did behind her back: Karen. Yes, that kind of Karen, the type you've probably heard stories about. The one who takes pride in being the unofficial enforcer of every rule, no matter how small or insignificant. Karen wasted no time making her presence known. Within weeks of moving in, she began pointing out violations left and right. Someone's mailbox was painted the wrong shade of brown. Karen sent them an email demanding it be fixed immediately. A family hosted a barbecue on a Saturday afternoon. Karen complained to the HOA about excessive noise even though you could barely hear the music from 2 cabins down. Pretty soon, everyone knew her reputation as the person who loved reporting others for even the tiniest infractions. At first, Alex tried to stay out of Karen's radar. They kept their property tidy, followed the HOA guidelines, and avoided drawing attention to themselves. But fate has a funny way of pulling people into situations they never asked for. One day, Karen noticed Alex's car parked near the shared lobby area late at night. To Karen, this was unacceptable. According to her interpretation of the HOA rules, parking in front of the lobby violated some vague clause about common space usage. Never mind that the space wasn't marked as restricted or that other residents occasionally used it without issue. In Karen's mind, Alex had crossed a line. What Karen didn't know, at least not yet, was that Alex had taken precautions long before she arrived on the scene. Months earlier, after hearing about break-ins happening in neighboring communities, Alex decided to install security cameras around their cabin. These weren't flashy gadgets designed to spy on neighbors. They were discreet devices meant to provide peace of mind in case anything suspicious happened. Little did Alex realize those cameras would end up playing a crucial role in protecting them from something far more personal than theft. As tension simmered beneath the surface, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's complaints were only the beginning. Sure, dealing with HOA drama wasn't part of the plan when they bought this cabin, But sometimes life throws curveballs when you least expect them. For now, Alex chose to remain calm and focused, trusting that preparation and patience would see them through whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, living in such a beautiful place was worth fighting for, even if it meant standing up to someone determined to make life difficult. It was a chilly Friday evening, the kind where the air felt crisp and clean, perfect for curling up with a good book or simply enjoying some quiet time. Alex had spent most of the day catching up on work emails and decided it was finally time to relax. Instead of heading straight back to their cabin, they grabbed a novel from the shelf and made their way to the communal lobby, a cozy, shared space that served as a gathering spot for residents. With its leather couches, a pool table, and a small coffee machine tucked in the corner, the lobby was one of the few places in the community where neighbors could unwind together. Alex settled into a comfortable chair near the fireplace, sipping on a cup of hot coffee and flipping through the pages of their book. The room was warm, the fire crackling softly in the background, and for a moment everything felt just right. There was no noise, no distractions, just the soothing ambiance of the mountains and the comforting weight of solitude. It was exactly what Alex needed after a long week. But peace has a funny way of being fleeting, especially when certain people are determined to disrupt it. About 30 minutes into their relaxation, the lobby door swung open with enough force to make Alex glance up. In walked Karen, her face already set in that familiar scowl she seemed to reserve for moments like this. Her eyes locked onto Alex almost instantly, narrowing as if she'd caught them doing something illegal. Without so much as a hello, Karen marched over, her boots clicking loudly against the wooden floor. She stopped just a few feet away, hands on her hips, looking down at Alex like a school principal about to reprimand a misbehaving student. "What do you think you're doing here?" Karen demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the calm atmosphere. Alex blinked, momentarily taken aback by the sudden confrontation. They closed their book slowly, placing it on the side table before responding. "I'm just relaxing." "Why? Is there a problem?" Karen scoffed, shaking her head as though Alex's answer confirmed all her worst suspicions. "Yes, there is a problem," she snapped. "This is common property, not your personal living room. You can't just park yourself here whenever you feel like it." Alex frowned, trying to process what Karen was saying. They'd seen plenty of other residents use the lobby before reading, chatting, even napping, and no one had ever raised an issue. Still, they didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily. "I'm a homeowner here," Alex said calmly. "I pay my dues, same as everyone else. I have every right to use the common areas." Karen wasn't having it. If anything, Alex's reasonable response only fueled her anger further. "Oh, don't give me that homeowner nonsense," she shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just because you own a cabin doesn't mean you get to hog the lobby like it's yours. You're trespassing, plain and simple." "Trespassing?" Alex stared at her, incredulous. This was their community, their home away from home, and now they were being accused of trespassing in a space specifically designed for residents to share. It was absurd, but Alex knew better than to argue with someone who thrived on conflict. Instead, they took a deep breath, keeping their voice steady. "Look, I understand you might have concerns, but I'm not breaking any rules. If you'd like, we can review the HOA guidelines together." That suggestion clearly rattled Karen. She hated being challenged, especially when someone dared to question her authority. Her face flushed red, and her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Don't try to outsmart me," she hissed. "You know exactly what you're doing wrong. Now pack up your stuff and leave, or I'll call the cops." The threat hung in the air between them, heavy and loaded. For a brief moment, Alex considered leaving just to avoid further drama. But something inside them pushed back against the idea of backing down. They hadn't done anything wrong, and giving in to Karen's bullying would only encourage her to keep targeting them and possibly others in the future. So instead of gathering their belongings, Alex reached for their phone. "Go ahead," Alex said evenly, holding up their phone. "Call whoever you need to. But just so you know, everything we're saying right now is being recorded." Karen froze, her mouth slightly agape as Alex tapped on their phone screen. What she didn't realize was that Alex wasn't bluffing. Thanks to the security cameras installed around the property, including the ones discreetly positioned in the lobby, every word of their conversation was being captured, not just on Alex's phone but also on video footage stored securely online. For a split second, Karen looked genuinely rattled. Her confidence faltered and her eyes darted around the room as if searching for hidden devices. But pride quickly stepped in, masking her unease. "You think your little camera stunt scares me?" she spat, regaining some of her earlier bravado. "Fine, I'll call the cops. Let's see how smug you are when they show up." With that, Karen whipped out her phone and dialed 911. As she paced back and forth, talking animatedly to the dispatcher, Alex stayed seated, outwardly calm but inwardly bracing themselves for what came next. They knew this situation had the potential to spiral out of control, but they also knew they were prepared. Between the recordings, the HOA documents, and their own composure, Alex felt confident they could handle whatever unfolded. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived, their presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. Both wore serious expressions as they stepped inside, glancing between Alex and Karen. One of them, a tall man with a clipboard, asked, "What's going on here?" Karen jumped at the opportunity to speak first, launching into a dramatic explanation of how Alex had been refusing to leave despite being told they were violating HOA rules. She gestured wildly, her voice rising with each sentence, painting herself as the aggrieved party while portraying Alex as some sort of rogue intruder. It was Alex's turn to respond. They remained calm and collected, pulling out a folder filled with relevant documents. Inside were copies of their homeownership papers, excerpts from the HOA bylaws confirming access rights to all common areas, and even screenshots of previous emails sent to the board clarifying these exact points. Most importantly, Alex played back the audio recording of Karen's earlier accusations, letting the officers hear her aggressive tone and baseless claims for themselves. The shift in the room was palpable. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, clearly unimpressed by Karen's theatrics. One of them turned to her and asked, "Do you have any documentation to support your claims?" Karen hesitated, fumbling for words. "Well, it's just common sense," she stammered. "Everyone knows you can't just camp out in the lobby like it's your own private space." "That may be true," the officer replied, "but without evidence to back it up, it's just your opinion. And opinions aren't enough to justify calling us out here." Realizing she was losing ground, Karen tried one last desperate tactic, blaming the HOA board. "They agree with me," she insisted. "Ask them yourself, they'll tell you I'm right." But Alex was ready for that too. They pulled up another email chain showing correspondence with the board, where officials had explicitly stated that using the lobby for short periods of relaxation was perfectly acceptable under the current guidelines. When Alex showed this to the officers, Karen's face turned bright red. She spluttered something incoherent before storming out of the lobby, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. As the officers prepared to leave, one of them gave Alex a reassuring nod. "Good thing you came prepared," he sighed. "Always helps to have proof on your side." And just like that, the immediate crisis was over. But Alex knew this wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning of a much larger battle. The next morning, Alex woke up feeling a mix of emotions: relief that the confrontation in the lobby had ended without major fallout, but also frustration over how far Karen had been willing to go. It was unsettling to think someone could escalate such a minor issue into a full-blown legal drama, complete with police involvement. But as they sipped their coffee and stared out at the serene mountain view, Alex knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly, and her behavior had already crossed a line. Alex decided it was time to take action, not just for themselves, but for the sake of everyone else in the community who might become a target of Karen's antics in the future. They picked up their phone and dialed the number of their attorney, a sharp and no-nonsense professional they'd consulted shortly after buying the cabin. The lawyer, known for handling HOA disputes, had advised Alex early on to document everything related to interactions with neighbors or the board. That advice now felt like a lifeline. When the call connected, Alex explained what had happened the night before: the unprovoked accusations, the 911 call, the security footage, and the police visit. The lawyer listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about the details. By the end of the conversation, they agreed on a plan. First, Alex would file a formal complaint against Karen with the HOA, citing harassment and misuse of authority within the association. Second, they would submit a police report documenting the false accusations and threatening behavior. While Alex wasn't eager to drag things through official channels, they understood the importance of setting boundaries. Filing the complaint wasn't hard. Alex had kept meticulous records of every interaction with Karen, including emails, texts, and notes from conversations. They attached screenshots, timestamps, and even snippets of the security footage to build an airtight case. As they hit send on the email to the HOA board, Alex felt a small sense of satisfaction. For once, Karen wouldn't be able to hide behind her self-righteous attitude. This time, she'd have to answer for her actions. Word of the incident spread quickly through the tight-knit community. In a place where everyone knew each other, at least casually, news traveled fast. Some neighbors approached Alex directly, expressing sympathy and sharing their own stories of run-ins with Karen. One elderly couple recounted how she'd berated them for leaving a welcome mat outside their door, claiming it violated some obscure aesthetic guideline. Another family admitted they'd stopped attending HOA meetings altogether because Karen dominated the discussions, turning them into finger-pointing sessions rather than productive gatherings. Not everyone sided with Alex, though. A handful of residents remained neutral, hesitant to pick sides in what they saw as a personal feud. Others, perhaps intimidated by Karen's reputation, stayed silent entirely. Still, the overall sentiment leaned heavily in Alex's favor. People were tired of her constant nitpicking and aggressive tactics. What started as annoyance was rapidly morphing into outright resentment. A few days later, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting to address growing concerns about Karen's conduct. Normally, these meetings drew only a fraction of the community, but this time, nearly every homeowner showed up. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs as people took their seats, anticipation hanging thick in the air. When the board president called the meeting to order, he acknowledged the tension head-on. "We're here tonight," he began, "because several members of our community have raised serious concerns about recent events. Our goal is to ensure fairness and transparency moving forward." One by one, homeowners stood up to share their experiences. Some recounted incidents similar to Alex's moments, when Karen had accused them of violating rules that didn't exist or interpreted guidelines in ways that suited her agenda. Others talked about how her behavior created a hostile environment, making them feel unwelcome in their own homes. Each story added another layer to the portrait of Karen as someone more interested in control than cooperation. When it was Alex's turn to speak, They kept their tone measured and factual. They recounted the events of the previous Friday evening, playing key portions of the security footage for the group. The video showed Karen storming into the lobby, pointing fingers and refusing to listen to reason. Watching it unfold on screen, many attendees exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who hadn't taken a firm stance against Karen seemed shocked by her behavior. Karen, sitting stiffly in the front row, looked visibly uncomfortable as the meeting progressed. When it was her turn to respond, she tried to defend herself, insisting she was only trying to enforce the rules and protect the community standards. But her arguments fell flat. Without concrete evidence to support her claims and facing a chorus of first-hand accounts contradicting her version of reality, she struggled to maintain credibility. By the end of the meeting, the board announced its decision. Karen would be stripped of her leadership role within the HOA. Her position on the committee, which she'd used to push her agenda, was terminated immediately. Additionally, the board introduced new guidelines for resolving disputes, emphasizing mediation and collaboration over punishment and blame. These changes aimed to prevent anyone from wielding power the way Karen had done. As the crowd dispersed, Alex couldn't help but notice the shift in energy. For the first time in months, there was a sense of relief, a collective exhale from people who'd been holding their breath under Karen's reign. Neighbors lingered in the parking lot afterward, chatting and laughing like old friends reunited after a long separation. Someone joked about starting a petition to rename the lobby Alex's Corner, earning chuckles from the group. Back at their cabin, Alex reflected on everything that had transpired. It had been a whirlwind few days, filled with stress, uncertainty, and moments of triumph. While standing up to Karen hadn't been easy, it had reinforced something important. Preparation and persistence pay off. The security cameras, the documentation, the willingness to stand firm, all of it had made a difference. More than that, it had inspired others to speak up too, creating a ripple effect that strengthened the entire community. Of course, Alex knew Karen wasn't going to disappear overnight. She still lived in the neighborhood, and while her influence had waned, she might try to stir up trouble again in the future. But for now, the balance of power had shifted. The HOA board was committed to fostering a more positive environment, and residents were determined to hold each other accountable, not out of spite, but out of mutual respect. As Alex sat by the fireplace that evening, watching the flames dance, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet pride. They'd fought for their rights, not just as a homeowner but as a member of a shared community. And in doing so, they'd reminded everyone, including themselves, that sometimes standing your ground is the only way to find peace. The days following the HOA meeting felt like a turning point for the entire community. The air seemed lighter, as if a storm cloud that had been hovering over everyone's heads had finally blown away. For Alex, though, it was a mix of emotions. Relief that Karen's grip on the neighborhood had loosened, but also a lingering awareness that people like her don't just fade into the background quietly. Still, there was no denying that the tide had shifted. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now greeted Alex warmly, some even stopping to chat or thank them for standing up to Karen. It was clear that the confrontation hadn't just been about one person. It had become symbolic of something bigger, a pushback against unnecessary conflict and bullying. Karen, on the other hand, became almost invisible. She rarely left her cabin, and when she did, she kept her head down, avoiding any interaction with others. Rumors began circulating among the residents. Some said she was planning to sell her property and move elsewhere, unable to face the fallout from the meeting. Others speculated she was simply laying low, waiting for the drama to die down before attempting to reassert herself. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: Karen's reputation in the community was irreparably damaged. No longer seen as a self-appointed enforcer, She was now viewed as someone who had abused her position and alienated those around her. But Alex wasn't naive enough to think the issue was completely resolved. While the HOA board had taken steps to limit Karen's influence, they knew better than to assume she'd stay silent forever. People like her often found ways to worm their way back into situations, especially when they felt cornered. So Alex remained vigilant, continuing to document everything meticulously. Every email, every conversation, every interaction went into a folder labeled HOA Records. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. After all, the last thing Alex wanted was to be caught off guard again. In the meantime, life in the cabin community slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could get after such. A public showdown. Residents started using the communal spaces more freely, without fear of being scolded for minor infractions. Families gathered in the lobby on weekends, kids laughing as they played board games while parents chatted over cups of coffee. Even the HOA meetings began to feel less tense, with discussions focusing on practical matters rather than petty grievances. The atmosphere was noticeably warmer, more collaborative, and genuinely neighborly. Alex, too, found themselves enjoying the renewed sense of peace. They spent evenings reading by the fireplace, mornings hiking along the trails, and afternoons tinkering with small projects around the cabin. But despite the calm, they couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to stay proactive. That's why a few weeks later, they decided to take another step, one that would not only protect themselves but also set an example for the rest of the community. They reached out to their attorney again, this time to discuss filing a formal restraining order against Karen. It wasn't a decision Alex made lightly. Restraining orders are serious legal actions, and Alex didn't want to come across as vindictive or overly aggressive. However, given Karen's history of harassment and her refusal to respect boundaries, it felt like the right move, not just for Alex's own safety, but to send a clear message that abusive behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The process wasn't quick or easy. Filing for a restraining order required gathering even more evidence, including additional video footage, witness statements from neighbors, and detailed accounts of every incident involving Karen. Alex spent hours combing through old emails and notes, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Their attorney helped draft the petition, carefully outlining the pattern of behavior that justified the request. When the paperwork was finally submitted to the court, Alex felt a weight lift off their shoulders. Whether the judge granted the order or not, they had done everything in their power to protect themselves and hold Karen accountable. While waiting for the court's decision, Alex focused on rebuilding trust within the community. They attended social events, joined a neighborhood book club, and volunteered to help organize a summer picnic. These small gestures went a long way in mending fences and fostering connections with neighbors who might have previously been hesitant to engage. Slowly but surely, Alex began to feel less like an outsider and more like an integral part of the community. One evening, during a casual get-together at a neighbor's cabin, someone brought up the topic of Karen. The group fell silent. For a moment, unsure how to broach the subject without reopening old wounds. Finally, an older man spoke up. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've lived here for years, and I've never seen anything like what happened with her. It's like she forgot we're all human beings." His words resonated with everyone present. A younger woman nodded, adding, "It's sad, really. I mean, we're all just trying to live our lives, enjoy this beautiful place. Why make it harder for everyone?" Alex listened quietly, letting the conversation unfold naturally. At one point, someone turned to them and said, "We owe you a lot, you know. You stood your ground when most of us were too scared to. And look where we are now." Alex smiled, shaking their head slightly. "Honestly, I didn't do it for recognition," they replied. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." None of us should have to live in fear of someone else's ego or temper. The room erupted in agreement, and for a brief moment, Alex felt a deep sense of belonging. It wasn't just about winning a battle against Karen. It was about creating a space where kindness and cooperation could thrive. That realization made all the stress and effort worth it. As the weeks turned into months, signs of Karen's presence grew increasingly rare. Her cabin sat dark most nights, and her car was seldom seen in the parking lot. Eventually, a for sale sign appeared outside her property, confirming what many had suspected: she was moving on. Whether she'd learned anything from the experience or simply decided to start fresh elsewhere, no one knew, and frankly, no one cared. What mattered was that the community had reclaimed its spirit, free from the shadow of intimidation and control. For Alex, the victory wasn't just personal, it was collective. They had shown that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean tearing others down. By staying calm, prepared, and principled, they had inspired others to do the same. And in doing so, they had transformed a tense, divided neighborhood into a place where people genuinely cared for one another. Of course, challenges would always arise in any community. Disagreements were inevitable, and personalities sometimes clashed. But thanks to Alex's courage and the lessons learned from the ordeal, the residents now approached conflicts differently, with patience, empathy, and a willingness to listen. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in a world full of uncertainties, progress was something worth celebrating. Months had passed since the stormy days of Karen's reign, and life in the cabin community felt almost unrecognizable compared to how it used to be. The transformation wasn't just superficial, it was deep-rooted, a shift in the way people interacted with each other and approached problems. For Alex, this change was more rewarding than anything they could have imagined when they first bought their little mountain retreat. What started as a personal struggle had blossomed into something much bigger, a renewed sense of unity and purpose among neighbors who now saw themselves as part of a shared journey rather than isolated individuals. Karen's departure, or at least her retreat from public view, marked the beginning of a new chapter for everyone. Her cabin eventually sold, though no one knew much about the new owner beyond the fact that they seemed friendly and low-key. Some joked that whoever moved in must have been briefed on how not to be Karen, which always got a laugh during casual conversations. But beneath the humor lay a serious truth. The community had drawn a line in the sand, and it was clear where that line stood. Respect, cooperation, and mutual understanding were non-negotiable values now. Alex continued using the communal spaces without hesitation or fear. Whether it was lounging in the lobby with a good book, hosting impromptu game nights with neighbors, or simply enjoying coffee by the fireplace, those moments felt lighter somehow. There was no lingering tension, no worry about being called out for some imaginary rule violation. Instead, there was laughter, warmth, and genuine connection. It reminded Alex why they fell in love with the place in the first place: the peace, the beauty, the simplicity of living surrounded by nature and good company. But what truly amazed Alex was how much the neighborhood dynamic had shifted. Neighbors weren't just coexisting anymore. They were actively building relationships. People organized potluck dinners, weekend hikes, and even a monthly book club. Kids played together outside, their laughter echoing through the trees, while adults swapped stories over glasses of wine. Someone suggested starting a community garden, and within weeks, volunteers came together to clear the land and plant seeds. These small acts of collaboration created ripples of positivity that spread throughout the entire community. One day, as Alex strolled through the garden, checking on the progress of the vegetables and flowers, they ran into an older couple who had lived in the community for years. They struck up a conversation, reminiscing about how different things used to feel before all the drama unfolded. You know, the woman said, leaning on her gardening gloves, "We've been here long. Enough to see a lot of changes. But I've never seen anything like what happened last year. You really turned things around." Alex chuckled softly, brushing dirt off their hands. "It wasn't just me," they replied. "Everyone played a part. Honestly, I think we all realized we didn't want to live in a place where people are constantly on edge. We needed to fix it, not just for ourselves, but for future residents too." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly, and you showed us how. Sometimes it takes someone standing firm to remind everyone else what's important." That comment stuck with Alex long after the conversation ended. It wasn't about being a hero or saving the day, it was about taking responsibility, not just for your own well-being but for the health of the community as a whole. By standing up to Karen, Alex hadn't just defended their rights. They had sparked a chain reaction of accountability and courage. Others followed suit, speaking up when necessary and supporting each other through challenges. Together, they had built something stronger than any single person could achieve alone. As summer gave way to autumn, the mountains transformed into a breathtaking canvas of golds, reds, and oranges. The crisp air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, and the evenings grew cozy and inviting. One chilly weekend, the community gathered for its annual Harvest Festival, a tradition that had fallen by the wayside in recent years due to internal tensions. This time, however, the event was bigger and better than ever. Tables groaned under the weight of homemade pies, roasted meats, and freshly baked bread. Children darted between stalls set up with games and crafts, while adults mingled, sharing food and laughter. At one point, someone handed Alex a microphone and asked them to say a few words. Caught off guard, Alex hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to the person who had become an accidental leader in their midst. "I'm not great at speeches," Alex began, earning a round of chuckles. "But I do want to say thank you to all of you. When I first moved here, I loved this place because of its beauty and serenity. But what makes it special now isn't just the scenery, it's you. It's the way we've come together to create something real, something meaningful." They paused, looking around at the smiling faces illuminated by strings of twinkling fairy lights. "We went through some tough times, and none of us came out unscathed. But we learned from them. We chose kindness over conflict, teamwork over division, and that's what makes this community so incredible." Applause broke out, warm and heartfelt, and Alex felt a lump rise in their throat. They hadn't expected such gratitude, but it reinforced everything they'd worked for. This wasn't just a victory against one difficult neighbor. It was a triumph of spirit, resilience, and humanity. Later that night, as Alex sat on their porch sipping hot cocoa and watching the stars twinkle above the treetops, they reflected on how far they'd come. Life in the mountains wasn't perfect, no place ever is, but it was close enough to perfection for Alex. The battles fought over parking spaces and lobby. Rules now seemed trivial compared to the friendships forged and lessons learned. Every challenge had been worth it because it led to growth for Alex personally and for the community as a whole. And yet, Alex couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. Who would have thought that installing security cameras to deter burglars would end up protecting them from something entirely different? Those cameras had captured more than just footage. They'd captured a pivotal moment in Alex's life, a reminder that preparation and perseverance can overcome even the toughest obstacles. As the fireflies danced in the distance and the cool breeze rustled the leaves, Alex felt a profound sense of contentment. They had fought for their home, their peace, and their right to belong. In doing so, they had helped create a space where others could feel safe and valued too. That, more than anything, made every sleepless night, every stressful email, and every tense confrontation worthwhile. The cabin community wasn't just a collection of houses nestled in the mountains. It was a family. A messy, imperfect, wonderfully human family. And Alex knew, without a doubt, that they were exactly where they were meant to be.